Yeah, well, he wasn't even saying he wasn't human. He was just saying that there were a load of different mutations on this particular body if it was human. But that in itself is a weird thing to say. It's like saying, well, it could be a cow, but it's got hands, and it's got ears. It's got a donkey's tail.
Flying saucers everywhere. Say, did you see one too? One night they came to me and they were also come to you. Those flying saucers are my friends, 'cause
Hello and welcome to Trolling with Logic, where we bring the hammer down on pseudoscience, ignorance, and unreason on a bi-weekly basis. And I think that's going to end up being a staple intro. I'm getting pretty good at that.
All right.
I'm your host, Nathan, and with me, as usually always, I think, are my co-hosts, Cal and Jen. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I haven't been on for weeks now, so I feel really out of the loop on this. So.
That's right. You've not been here for ages, have you? Welcome
Almost,
back. You can be our special guest for today, Cal.
You only missed 2 shows. So it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the 3rd season of The X-Files, there is an episode called Nisei, which includes a scene in which FBI agent Fox Mulder is watching a video of an alien autopsy. Watching with him is his partner, the skeptical Dana Scully, who comments, "Mulder, this is even hokier than the one they aired on the Fox network. You can't even see what they're operating on." That Fox network feature documentary is what we are reviewing here on the show today. This is a UFO conspiracy documentary called Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, and was hosted by Commander William T. Riker himself, Jonathan Frakes, who played the Riker character in Star Trek The Next Generation. When this thing was aired on the Fox network in August 1995, it caused a huge sensation. It was a pretty big deal, and it made an impact on the public perception of the so-called Roswell incident.
Yeah, it's just I want to bring this. The reason I've wanted to do this on the show, because it's not just that it's a kooky kind of conspiracy thing, but the documentary itself now stands as a very kind of interesting historical artifact, given, later it's come out, the truth about this film. But like I say, at the time, it was the X-Files was just kicking off, and so there's a huge spike in this interest. And also just the claims that this guy made, and now that they're being reviewed, I say it's just a very nice kind of captures a moment in time in the 90s when the interest was so peaking in this, and this actually caused some genuine debate amongst people as to the veracity of the claims.
Yeah, of course, today it's just an obscure conspiracy video among thousands you can find on YouTube, but that historical value that you talked about is what makes it noteworthy. And it's kind of a good exercise in how to think skeptically about things, because, as we said already, this was before the reveal that Ray Santili had faked the footage. And so...
Well, that's... he's not actually confessed to faking it. As always, he's made it a bit muddier than that.
Yeah, what he said was that the original footage was degraded, and he basically filled in the gaps of what... Because he said he saw the undegraded version in 1992, and he said that what he did was, I created this special effect just to fill in the degraded portions of what I actually saw.
And he's also said there's a few frames of the original that are still intact that he put in there, but he absolutely refuses to say which frames they are.
That's a very typical line to take when you've been kind of rumbled, but you still want to keep it alive, because it made him a lot of money.
Because the thing is, if there are original frames, you think he'd want to admit to it, say, there you go, you can see these original frames, compare them to the work I did and see how amazing it all matches up. Or like say, you can see how it's different, and that shows you that's an original, but and that part kind of plays into the kind of premise of this documentary very well. Like knowing this now and then watching it again, you can see, like I said, I discussed this before we were doing it. I know we're not talking about it, but it's kind of interesting. And I always think this documentary, they actually tried to make it about their hunt for the cameraman. And I think it came back with such little footage that all this other stuff has kind of been patched on, because it does get a bit random with its experts at times.
Yeah, the private investigator subplot, if you will, about William C. Deere trying to hunt down the participant in the 1947 filming. that portion of this documentary seemed like kind of tacked on, like they were originally going to flesh that out more, but they couldn't get enough material for it.
Because there's no real payoff to that in the end. Very anticlimactically ending to that.
Looking it up afterwards, there seems to be a claim that the person who actually recorded the footage was the same person who recorded various other things like the atomic bomb tests. But once again, there's sort of no confirmation of that, and everything's a bit sketchy. And they brought him in as an expert at one point, didn't they? And said it's definitely the right kind of camera equipment because it was a fixed focus distance, and if you went in close, it wouldn't have focused, and that's the kind of kit that was available. And then that's about all that he said, I think, pretty much through the entire...
He was also, just because they bring in an actual professional cameraman at one point, and he was saying, it's going out of focus, and also there's a bit where they're actually doing something, I think it's when they're sawing the skull or something, and they say, like, he just stands behind the doctor's back, why wouldn't he go around to get a better angle? And military guys just said, he didn't want to interfere with what was going on.
Yeah, of course, because that's what you do, isn't it? Yeah, no. There was only two guys in there. There was plenty of angles he could have taken. He didn't have to be behind the doctor. Yeah.
You have an alien from another world on your operating table, and you're worried about getting in the way of the surgeons.
Yeah.
I mean, the most stupid thing about it is if he'd have just stayed at one end of the table, or even just set it up on a tripod at one end of the table, it would never have been in the way of anything that they were doing at all, and you'd have got the whole thing from start to finish.
Well, that's the other thing. You'd think they would have had multiple cameramen in the room to document every single angle and a few fixed cameras on the roof. So,
well, yeah.
You think they would be extremely thorough with this huge, kind of very vital discovery they just made.
Exactly, and also the room was set up to look as if it was a purpose-built facility for this kind of thing. There was a microphone hanging from the ceiling, the phone on the wall. There was an observation port behind where there was somebody looking through, and yet the camera was freehand. Didn't make sense. Didn't really make sense.
Yeah, that was one detail they weren't too careful about. They were careful about other things like putting a 1937 era Bell telephone in and like a sunken tray of the kind used in the 1940s, but some things he let slip.
And also the guy who was responsible for this was a guy who worked in films, as in he worked with films. He had view of extensive collections of different films from that particular era, so he would have been able to see what kind of stuff was around. So he was the perfect kind of person to be able to do this anyway.
Yeah, this was John Humphreys, I believe, who was responsible for the effects and the filming of this.
Yeah, he's come out and confessed, hasn't he, that it was a hoax?
Yeah, he was an artisan sculptor. He was employed, I believe, by Santili and his partner, Gary Schofield, to construct 2 dummy alien bodies over a period of 3 weeks. The casts he used contained sheep brains that he placed in raspberry jam. They also used chicken entrails and knuckle joints that they got from a butcher shop in London. So all this stuff is out in public knowledge now.
As for the documentary itself, as we stated, this is kind of a heavy use of celebrity because, again, you got to remember at the time Star Trek was very big on TV, so this helped sell it a lot. And this is another kind of observation I made. I honestly think they just did the same take of all these intros with Jonathan Frakes because he just seems to repeat himself, just slightly different wording or a different angle, and I got that vibe very strong. That maybe he just filmed this a few times and that was it for him. Paycheck, please, I'm on my way home.
And one of the things that they kept saying throughout, well, I think they said it maybe 3 or 4 times in the documentary is, if it's real, it's amazing, and if it's fake, it's still amazing. And it's just like, okay, so you're basically saying that regardless of whether it's real or fake, it should be seen as something important. And I thought that was a load of bollocks, to be honest, because it's like, if it's fake, then you've been duped, and it just shows how easy to dupe people are. So it's useful, but apart from that, it's really not, especially in this day and age. If we look back at it now with the kind of technology that we have now, it looks almost amateurish. It looks like something you could easily do. I mean, the special effects for that kind of stuff were around in the 70s anyway. You've got The Thing, for example. Yeah. So, yeah.
Stan Winston was fooled by it, even, and he did the effects for Jurassic Park and Aliens. And
that was an embarrassing scene.
It was, and this just goes to show that, well, Stan Winston isn't a scientist, but the principle is kind of the same, where scientists are easily fooled by charlatans like psychics and parapsychologists and that kind of thing, where they're not expecting to be deceived. And so they look at stuff like this, and they're not thinking about the deception factor. They're just looking at it as, how could I have done this? And if they can't think of how they could have done this, then they're prone to jump to a wrong conclusion. And if Stan Winston had consulted, not a magician like James Randi, but somebody who was skilled in the art of, well, fraud detection, could have helped him out.
Or an illusionist even, but it's strange you mentioned Stan Winston, because actually a few years later Stan Winston came and he said that they actually left huge portions of his interview out, and he said they left out where he clearly says, it's a hoax. I don't know how they did it, but it is quite obviously a hoax. I don't know how to, I would do it. And he says that's how he was saying it. He said, I personally don't know how I would approach that, because I've never been asked to do such a thing in the movies.
So it wasn't necessarily embarrassing for him. It was just that they left out huge portions.
Yeah, and they also altered, like I said, the main thrust, he's kind of clarified that I was just saying I wouldn't know how to do that because I've never been asked.
Yeah.
And he said, so it's quite impressive, but...
What about the wetness though, Callum? What about the wetness?
The uniform wetness and the way it drips.
That was amazing. I mean, when they were doing the cut into it with the blood dripping out, I was thinking, well, the image is so grainy anyway. It's very difficult to see what's going on. And that kind of technology where they would have a pen that squirts out a little bit of liquid to pretend like it's a scalpel, which it could have even been. That technology's been around since the early times of cinema. You know, that sort of stuff.
But again, this is where the historical artifact is very vital to remember, that this was before the internet where we could stream videos, download them and analyze frame by frame. So, it was just shown on TV. You might record it on your VHS and, where it would be even grainier to watch. So that's why I think it just impressed so many people.
I want to note something that I've noted before in relation to the fact that Jonathan Frakes is in this documentary, and that is that I've noticed a weird trend in which the stars of these great sci-fi television shows tend to go on to host pseudoscience documentaries that peddle woo and mystery mongering. Other examples include William Shatner. He was the host of Weird or What. Leonard Nimoy was host of the In Search Of series. Yep. And Mitch Pileggi, the FBI director character from the X-Files, he was also in Search Of, and he was also in that fake moon landing documentary called Conspiracy Theory, Did We Land on the Moon? That also aired on Fox. Then there's Kate Mulgrew from The Principal. From Star Trek, she was on The Principal. And Dean Stockwell from Quantum Leap was on the Phenomenon series.
And also Armin Shimmerman from DS9 was in What the Bleep Do We Know?
So Jesse Ventura from Alien.
Jesse Ventura's Jesse Ventura did.
Yeah. He's been in plenty of sci-fi as well, though.
I think this shows that the general public kind of is attracted to famous stars of sci-fi shows, and there's a sci-fi appeal to these sorts of documentaries that people latch onto.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm generalizing too much, but a lot of Star Trek fans and all that would like to believe there's aliens, so, they see Jonathan Frakes on and it's going to help sell it, and they're using that star appeal, obviously, to the max here.
One thing that I really enjoyed, I have to say, about this documentary was some of the leaps that people took within it. For example, there was one point at which a guy said about a panel which had sort of this hand symbol on it. He goes, "It looks like a six-fingered hand, so it must have been a thought-powered flight control console." And I was like, "That's amazing!" So you see a hand symbol with 6 fingers, and you immediately leap to thought-powered flight control. Amazing.
This is something we should talk about, is the catalog of crash debris that they launch into near the beginning of the film. They have a Dr. Jesse Marcel, who's featured in an interview here as a quote-unquote Roswell eyewitness. So he states that his father, Major Jesse Marcel, was on the intelligence team at the Roswell Army Airfield, and he was among the team of military personnel dispatched to the alleged crash site to investigate what crashed out there. And this doesn't make any sense at all, because what this film claims is that his father collected these various pieces of debris from the site and immediately took them home that night with him to show his wife and son at 2:00 in the morning. Does this make any sense at all?
It doesn't seem to, no.
No.
And this Jesse Marcel guy says that he saw the army footage of the debris later on, and that the pieces were different. Now, instead of saying, well, maybe my father, made his own pieces of debris as replicas from pieces in his garage or something, he says, maybe these smaller pieces that my father brought home blew out of the aircraft in an in-flight explosion, and maybe they're just different pieces of the same craft.
Yeah. So, yeah, he said there was quite a few things that were different. In fact, he didn't say anything that was the same about them, apart from two things being I-beams. Now, where do we know I-beams from? We know I-beams from buildings. We know I-beams from many different human applications. So there's nothing alien about an I-beam.
Nope.
Why I-beams just aren't generally used for aeronautics? They're not renowned for their aeronautical, even just in the framework. I mean, I might be wrong there, but I just don't see them as being very practical.
Yeah, but guys, they had hieroglyphics on it that he didn't recognize.
Oh yeah, if you don't recognize the writing, then it must be aliens. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
I mean, how old was he at the time as well, though? Because if you're a kid, how well can you read other languages? It could have been a different language from Earth. It could have been anything, couldn't it? But
it could have been Arabic or something like that.
Well, I think his father just probably, if this story is true, the best explanation that his father just probably made this stuff to entertain his wife and kid, and just put some hieroglyphic-looking things on it and said, "Hey, this is from a flying saucer. Oh, but don't tell your friends about it, okay?" Mm-hmm. There is one piece of debris that they go on and on about in this, and that is the foil-like metal material that you can wad up in a ball, let it go, and it would unfold itself. Reportedly extremely resilient, it can't be burned or cut up, and this woman named Frankie Rowe, another Roswell eyewitness, says she watched her father, the Roswell fire captain, and some of his crew playing with this material, and that she played with it for about 5 minutes. When she scrunched it up in her hand, it disappeared completely, but when she let go, it unfolded. She says she was threatened by government officials who threatened to take her out into the middle of the desert, kill her, and bury her body.
Yeah, that's what government officials spend their day doing.
Yeah. It was a real appeal to emotion on her part. It's the kind of thing that somebody does when they know they're being called out on something, but they want to appear to have sort of the moral high ground as if they're being accused of something. They automatically go to some sort of an extreme claim to say, look, I'm not lying. I was threatened. And I've heard it a lot of times before in different circumstances. And it was very, yeah.
It's just strange to me that this alien technology, this foil metal stuff, would end up in the fire station with a crew of firefighters just playing around with it shortly after the crash. Wouldn't it end up somewhere else more top secret than that?
Exactly, and also what they said at that particular point when they were talking about it being in the fire station is that they tried to set fire to the metal, but they couldn't. It's like, why are firemen trying to set fire to metal? For fuck's sake. It's fucking metal. Oh no, look at that. This is really unusual metal that we can't set fire to. What? Fuck off.
I'm always I'm interested in the history of it, because you've got to remember, I think most younger folk, probably yourself, Nathan, were you under the impression that this whole Roswell thing's been hotly debated for since it happened?
That's impression actually, you get from all the 90s stuff.
Yeah, because it actually wasn't. This was really the start of Roswell mania. It had gone pretty much cold, and it was just a few kooks wrote. And this kind of really kick-started ufology in a big way, and the whole Roswell mythos. It's like a lot of these events, it's not till years later that the real kind of mythos develops around them.
Yeah, because when early on in the Roswell incident craze, in the 60s and 70s around then, the whole debate was around what the nature of the craft was, and it turned out that it really was a weather balloon. The Air Force wasn't lying about that, and the debris descriptions are consistent with weather balloon and not anything fantastical.
Well,
and
so just on that point, I was just going to break in there. Sorry. There has been conflicting stories around that recently, saying that it wasn't actually a weather balloon, but it was a high altitude nuclear detection balloon.
Yeah, it's something similar to a weather balloon. That the Air Force was using to detect whether or not
launches or something like that, or Soviet missile tests.
Well, whether the Soviets were testing nuclear missiles in the atmosphere. There was a rancher, I forget his name, who came across the debris, and he was the one to first spot it, but he didn't investigate it more closely because he just thought it was some kind of weather balloon stuff that fell from the sky, and it wasn't until later that he went back, which isn't consistent with if it's alien debris, he would look at it more closely right away. But so early on, the whole Roswell incident thing kind of centered around the craft itself, and it went away shortly before the 1990s because there wasn't much to the story. But like you said, in the mid-90s with this documentary and with some other things, renewed interest in it came back up again because of this Alien Autopsy thing.
Mm-hmm. There was one point, I think, sort of to the middle of the documentary, where they were talking to an author, and the author said he was surprised to find out that lots of people claim to have seen and handled the debris. And I thought, well, if it's a popular myth and loads of people are in the area, there's a lot of people who would want a piece of that pie, who would want to say they were involved in that. You know, so it's kind of a popular thing to be a part of. If anyone, it's like when somebody says, what were you doing sort of around 9/11 or any sort of big event that happens, people want to tie themselves into that. People want to be a part of that. So to say that there were a lot of people who claim to have handled or seen the debris is kind of a weird appeal to popularity. That didn't fit in there, but it's something that they kind of stuck on for a couple of minutes.
One important thing that this film goes into is the Kodak code. So the documentary claims that the first few feet on the film of the autopsy footage contained encoded information that the reel's manufacturer, Kodak, were able to date to 1947. They took that as evidence, but for all the makers of this documentary could know at the time, even absent Santili's later confession, so to speak, the first few feet of Film magazine could easily have been cut from any 1947 newsreel, because tons and tons of such reels are archived and available to the public here in the States. Just simply paste that lead bit of film in at the beginning, then shoot the autopsy sequences separately, and you could take that to Kodak and they would say, oh yeah, this looks like it could be from 1947.
Apparently that's exactly what the guy did, but in fact Kodak didn't even have the guy who analysed it, who saw, was it a circle and a triangle on it, or a square and a triangle, which is the dating format, was never even sent anything that actually had footage on it. It was blank celluloid, and that blank celluloid was dated that particular time but had no relevance to the rest of the film. The guy at Kodak never saw any of the alleged film, which nobody has seen. All that people have seen is two metal cylinders, sort of film cylinders, one of which had was it a United States military intelligence or federal thing, a badge on it that wasn't actually in use until months after this film was supposed to have been filmed, and also the film was apparently never handed in to the government. So why would it have a stamp on it?
Yeah, it takes just a very little bit of thought to kind of deconstruct everything that's going on here.
So, I mean, I do that, but people do forget how big a deal this was. I mean, you remember at the time, Jen. This was covered in lots of mainstream media, It was a really big deal for the time.
It got people's imaginations going, didn't it? Especially, like you said, with Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. TNG being out at the time, etc.
A few years ago on this show, we interviewed, have I forgotten his name, is it Paul Schaefer? Or Schaefer, he's quite a well-known UFO debunker, and he says nearly all the peaks in UFO fascination, it always follows the popular culture. It's never actually gone the other way. It's always like the movies come out and then people see what they see in the movies everywhere.
That makes sense.
I still, though, I mean, I know once again we're looking at it in hindsight, but there were so many things, and also as adults when we were kids at the time, there's so many things throughout this entire documentary that screamed wishful thinking throughout the entire thing. So there was another line that I wrote down here where the guy said, she described 4 fingers, not 6. So a bit of a discrepancy there. Yeah. And then it appeared that they just cut it off as if to say, like, oh, well, it's a different account. It's slightly different, but she still had the same general shape of the thing, even if, like, the hands were entirely different. And they still decided to include that. So there doesn't seem to be a hell of a lot. There wasn't really any continuation between the different stories, and yet they didn't seem to see that as a problem. They still saw it as very intriguing. And, you know, these eyewitness testimonies of various different weird things going on.
One really interesting part is, who do you think the other person involved in this documentary was to come out to say they took me out of context and I didn't say that? See if you can guess who it is, because it's not not a name you would think would do that given the nature of this documentary.
Is it Riker?
No. It's actually Kevin Randall himself.
Oh, the author of that book that they interviewed, who said that he interviewed all those people who handled the debris?
Yeah. He has actually come out and said, no, I believe this is a hoax, and he is kind of worshipped within the UFO community. I mean, you've heard the name before, Jen, I'm guessing from your sniggering there.
It's hilarious that there's so many people within the UFO community and also within the conspiracy theorist community, or rather, they're not within it, but they are lauded as heroes of free thinking and anti-government and all that kind of stuff. And one of them, which you'll know, who's the most famous one of them all, is Tesla. They all love Tesla. They all see Tesla as the lord of free energy and all this kind of stuff. But he had nothing to do with what they talk about in that. He wasn't a free energy peddler. He wasn't this guy. He wasn't a perpetual motion device peddler.
Yeah.
And yet he is one of the most lauded conspiracy theory gods around. Yeah. There's a lot of them. It's great fun looking through all that.
They just say, if you look up Kevin Randall, he has got a huge kind of back catalogue of books, and he is a huge believer in UFOs and alien visitation. And it kind of gives you an idea about this documentary that even he said, no, I think this is bullshit.
Yeah. And there was another guy in the documentary who was like that as well. Is that the one you're talking about? The one who actually said, I think, no, it was a different guy.
No, he came out later and said, no, they took me out of context with this. And it's just notable because of his extensive record within the UFO community.
Yeah. There was a guy that actually interviewed during this documentary who said, I've forgotten which guy it was, but he said, I wanted to see this film before it came out, but I wasn't allowed to have a look at it. And I think it is a hoax. I think this is fake. But that guy also was a big UFO expert and UFO believer.
It's kind of like, just say there's some fringe false flag theory out there, and even Alec Jones comes out and says, no, that's nuts, guys. This is kind of the equivalent. That's kind of how big a deal this is. Kevin Randall, I don't think I can state how big a name he is to UFO nuts everywhere.
The thing is, someone can support a movement and someone can support certain ideas within it and still be kind of skeptical. I can't claim to understand the kind of wishful thinking that goes into believing, for example, the hundreds and if not thousands now of different so-called UFO videos out there from like back even Second World War all the way through to now. There's a certain level at which people cut off their skepticism and start thinking, what if? And that's usually the point at which somebody starts going into the government cover-up UFO mindset.
It's an asymmetry between using your imagination and using your skepticism. Carl Sagan talks about how we need skepticism and imagination both. Skepticism to make sure that what we're believing is actually true and to guard against false beliefs, and imagination to make sure that we're not closing off possible avenues of possibilities, basically. When somebody who's, like you said, when their skepticism is cut off at some point, that point comes later for some than for others. It's an asymmetry, it's a mismatch, an imbalance between those two approaches to looking at things.
I mean, just on that point, there's a lot of talk these days about kids not being allowed to develop their imagination as much as they used to be able to, not going out as much as they used to, spending a lot more time in front of screens, indoors. And there's a fear that some people have that is actually lowering their creativity and that their creative output is then being put into kind of believing things that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise done if they'd have been a more active person in terms of their experimentation with the world around them. What do you think about that? I know it's a bit of a vague question, but...
It's kind of weird because I always think that people should be more skeptical now given all the information that they can have just online. But
there's so much false information amongst it as well. And
but again, it's like a previous guest, Dr. Yasinski said. He doesn't actually think conspiracy theories are any more prevalent than they've ever been. In fact, Nathan, does he not actually believe they're on the decline at the moment?
Yeah, he does. He said they peaked in the 1890s and in the 1950s, because in the 1890s, that's when politics and business were becoming intertwined and becoming aligned together, and there were the monopoly trusts going on and different antitrust scandals going on, and so the public went through a peak of conspiratorial thinking at that time. And then, of course, in the 1950s, it was McCarthyism and the fear of communism. And so these things go in peaks and troughs, but he said overall, over the past 50 years, it's been declining. And he said that this current decade is the lowest that Americans have been conspiratorial in many, many decades.
That is interesting. That's interesting. Another thing, of course, to do with the whole ufology sort of extraterrestrial type of thing is the whole boom of the electronics era that we've been in for the last sort of 100 years or so, where we've had this huge advancement in terms of computing. And a lot of people put that down to us having received some sort of a technology from somewhere rather than the natural progression from large electronics to small through those electronics in themselves being able to help us compute things faster, to fabricate things more easily, etc., etc. And I wonder how much longer that's going to continue, how much longer it's going to be before people just accept the fact that this is a natural evolution of us and our technology, and get out of the whole mindset that this is something, I say people as a general thing. I'm talking about ufologists, of course.
But I think the ufologist, with the ufologist crowd, it's really shrunken years now. I mean, ufology it's kind of, since it really did peak in the 90s, I think it's just lost a lot of its legitimacy since everything went digital.
Yeah, because since everything went digital, now they just have blurry photographs and video to go on.
Yeah, and so much fake stuff as well. So people are starting to learn how to use Blender at a very young age and just making their own shit now. Oh, look, I can track things and put a duck in the sky.
I think the only real ufologists left are amateur YouTube makers.
Yeah, and they seem to be the fringe of the fringe now. There's no even kind of semi-legitimate sounding guys. I mean, I know I'll keep using the word, but, in the 90s there was, some of the footage that came out did look, it kind of caught your attention, but now it's just the people who are putting it out are so crazy with kind of what their interpretations of everything. I mean, you only have to look at Cool Hard Logic with that guy Monroe who doesn't believe planes exist.
That was a hilarious video.
Yes.
Yeah, saying that though, there's still this thing that people jump to conclusions when they see things in the sky that they can't explain. For example, we've had missile launches at night or at dusk that have then caught the upper atmosphere, and people have seen these weird sort of plumes in the upper atmosphere when the sun's still below the horizon, and they thought, what the hell is this? And then you get all the videos going up on YouTube. Is this a UFO? Is this a missile test? Etc., etc., etc. And also one of the most famous ones recently was, what was it called again? The Norway spiral, where people were saying it's some sort of a portal to another dimension or a wormhole or something like that, where it was just a missile spiraling out of control into the upper atmosphere. So there's still this whole propensity for people to actually jump to conclusions that aren't particularly rationally based. People have these sort of fantastical ideas, and I suppose at the very least it shows that people have still got an imagination and that they still watch sci-fi, that's alright, I suppose.
Yeah, sci-fi's good. On the subject of sci-fi, I want to briefly go on like a little tangent because I'm curious to see what you guys think. In shows like The X-Files, you've got the believer and the skeptic kind of juxtaposed together, Dana and Fox. And in the world of the X-Files, there really is a conspiracy going on to cover up alien activity on Earth. That's in the story. Because this has been debated by some skeptics online about the show. Do you think Dana is a good skeptic or a straw man skeptic? Because these things in the story itself, these things really are happening, but Dana is properly skeptical. Is she a good skeptic?
You say that, but in the new series, they backtracked on what happened in the old one. So can we just ignore the new series? Is that all right?
Oh yeah, I haven't even seen the new series. I didn't know it was out yet.
I haven't seen any season of it since the second season. I gave up at that point.
Oh really?
Don't watch the newest one. The newest one kind of backtracks and claims it does a load of bullshit. It's horrible.
Although, just out of morbid curiosity, I watched the whole Inspired 9/11 episode just out of morbid curiosity. I was severely let down by that. So.
I don't know. I think
I would go. She's a really bad skeptic because whatever Mulder claims, she comes up with the explanation just straight away instead of asking for more detail. Yeah. That's what always struck me.
Yeah, it's kind of a deliberately contrary position rather than a genuinely skeptical position.
Because that's kind of what I call the movie skeptic. there's any movie where there's weird things, skeptic just say, oh, it's obviously this, and this. There's never oh, well, can we at least go to the site, check things out, take photos, and I'll think about this.
Yeah, that's true. Movies are terrible at depicting skeptics, but I have a slightly different take on the X-Files. I think Dana is a good skeptic, that she's just considering more plausible, mundane explanations before going to the extreme end. I think, even though everything that Fox Mulder is investigating turns out to be true, I think that his proneness or his disposition to believing in these things is not justified, because he just automatically jumps to the most extreme beliefs right away, and he doesn't discount anything at all. And so I think he's not a critical thinker, and that it kind of goes to illustrate an interesting point that even if what you believe in is true or ends up being true, it doesn't mean that you start out believing in them for the right reasons.
I don't necessarily agree with your assessment there, because I don't think his views are particularly extreme based on his experiences. Because in his experiences, remember, his sister got levitated out of a window when he was there by an alien spacecraft.
Yeah,
so
that's
if
true.
you've witnessed something like that, then any kind of jumping to conclusions in terms of, that immediately brings that as a viable explanation into your worldview. In a world where that kind of stuff happens, it's not out of the ordinary. It's not like an extreme viewpoint to take, especially if you've witnessed it yourself. So if we're applying Occam's razor to that kind of universe, I don't think it's extreme.
I didn't know how common his experience was in that secondary universe.
It's not common, but it's his experience. It's one he has a vivid experience of. And also with all the weird shit that happens in that universe, including, the black oil and the super soldiers and God knows what else, and other things that would be incredibly difficult to explain by Occam's razor in terms of our universe that we live in. I don't think it's completely extreme, the kind of leaps that he takes. And also, of course, there's one episode, one of my favourite episodes, in fact, is when they're trapped underground, in this fungus that has spread everywhere, and they're sort of locked into this sort of fungus matrix. Mm-hmm. It's really weird, and they're stuck underground in this kind of matrixy kind of reality while they're being slowly absorbed or whatever.
Yeah,
and
once again, that episode too.
Yeah, it's awesome. And that kind of stuff, if that kind of weirdness is happening within your universe and all the other things that happen, skepticism in terms of the kind of skepticism that Dana shows, where she's kind of completely disbelieving of things that she's even experienced herself, it seems more out of place than his mindset a lot of the time, in my opinion.
It's just to go back to the documentary at hand. Mm-hmm. When you research this, you actually find out that the director, when he was approached to make this, and he interviewed Santili, he came back to Fox and said, "This guy's full of it." That was his quote. But Fox said, "Well, we can't go saying it's a hoax in the build-up, we'll get poor ratings." So this kind of shows you the angle they were going with for this. Yeah, I don't think he's ever actually really distanced himself, the director, from it.
Yeah, skepticism isn't good for ratings at all.
Yeah. Well, saying that, this actually does give skepticism a better shout than most of these kind of documentaries usually do.
Yeah.
Because usually it's just like at the end they have the token skeptic who just says, well, it was this, this, and this, and then they say, oh, but what do you think, dear viewer, wink, wink.
But saying that once again, though, if what's true about, people's interviews being cut out in terms of their skepticism, if everybody's skeptical viewpoint was actually properly displayed throughout that entire documentary, then pretty much everybody would have been a skeptic.
Yeah, but overall, I thought it's still nowhere near good, what I would consider a good balance, but it was handled a little bit better than usual in ufology documentaries that I've seen.
I was a bit disappointed to see that Jonathan Frakes' beard was particularly unwell kept at that particular documentary. I don't know whether he was I don't know whether that was the fashion at the time or what, but, it was a little bit Grizzly Adams, and I would have liked to see him a little bit better trimmed, but then, I'm being a bitch at this point.
I think TNG had just gone off the air, so maybe he was just having a break from having to constantly trim it every week.
Yeah, I think that's right. He had his dad jumper on, and he was letting it go a little bit, wasn't he? He was just having a chillax. I shouldn't hold it against him, really.
What did you guys think of the forensic pathologists talking about Turner syndrome in relation to the alien being that was in the video.
I honestly believe that was a little bit of filler just thrown in there.
Yeah, because it's strange to me to think that forensic pathologists, even if they were just speculating about an alien being, would kind of apply a pathology that's known to occur in humans and just assume that it also occurs in an alien species.
I don't think that's what they were going for. I think they were trying to say that that particular body was that of a human with Turner syndrome, but other malformation as well.
That they didn't actually believe it was an alien, that they actually thought it was.
Yeah, they thought it was a human being with Turner syndrome, but then it was a very loose connection. They were talking about the kind of the vague similarity of the shape, but it didn't explain the size of the eyes or the lowered ears. It didn't explain the fact that this particular alien apparently had no nipples, that the legs and arms were different, that it has it had polydactyly and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very strange thing to throw in there, considering that it only potentially linked up to maybe one of the physical differences of this particular alleged body. It was weird.
Weirdly enough, that's probably the one interview they should have really cut and edited a bit more tightly.
Yeah.
Because it just seems he was just thinking out aloud. It could be this, could be this, could be this.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all very rare. Because he does actually say, I don't know, but I don't think it's an alien. He said, I'm not going to say it's not from this world. Most I can say it's just not human.
Yeah, well, he wasn't even saying he wasn't human. He was just saying that there were a load of different mutations on this particular body if it was human. But that in itself is a weird thing to say. It's like saying, well, it could be a cow, but it's got hands. And it's got ears. It's got a donkey's tail.
It's just strange to me that two forensic pathologists would say this could be a person with Turner syndrome when the body of the alien is designed to be pretty much exactly what the popular conception of aliens are. How would a human who has Turner syndrome end up looking just like that? Wouldn't they just say, oh, this has got to be just somebody's joke?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they did at some point. Maybe they were pushed. You know how in that documentary with Christopher Hitchens, they kind of pushed and pushed and pushed for him to give some sort of an explanation in regards to panspermia.
That was Dawkins they went after.
Yeah,
Dawkins,
Expelled.
Yeah. That's it, yeah. So, I mean, maybe they pushed and pushed and pushed these people until they gave something that vaguely sounded as if it could have been sort of vaguely interesting, and then cut the rest of it out. Don't know, do we?
That's a distinct possibility.
So it was a disappointing documentary. I mean, watching it now, it felt really disappointing. And there was this whole use of music throughout the entire thing, this spooky kind of music, which they always use when they try and convince you, like, woo.
Very common in UFO, alien, conspiracy type documentaries. We saw the same thing in Secret Space Program.
But it was not the kind of use of the Inception noise, though. Thank
Yeah.
Yeah, thank God for that, yeah.
I'm never going to forgive you for making me endure that, Jen.
And then they found a weather balloon. Whoa.
Yeah, this one was actually a little more bearable to watch than Secret Space Program.
It's kind of, I would say probably overall, it's sort of a semi-entertaining watch. I mean, even if you're not into skepticism, it's kind of one of those bits of filler TV.
Yeah.
That's probably the most unbelievable thing was to know that this was such a big deal at a time when it seems such an unremarkable 45 minutes.
I wonder what in the future, say 20 years from now, what do people today take seriously and make a big deal out of? 20 years from now, people will be like, it's amazing that that was such a huge sensation back then. I wonder if it'll be the GMO fear craze or the vaccine fear craze or something like that.
Yeah. I can't think of anything in the last few years that's kind of sort of crystallized a whole movement like this.
No, I mean, with the advent of social media, there's so much information and so much, so many videos and all that kind of stuff out there that it's so saturated. I think there's very little you can pick out, really.
It just all goes by so fast that it's just hard to pick whereas this kind of it was just one central thing that people could get round and dissect at the time.
Yeah. I mean, talking about things that are linked to Star Trek actors, though, one thing that still stands out for me many, many years later that was created before my birth is Leonard Nimoy's The Tale of Bilbo Baggins, which if anyone hasn't watched that is something to watch. That is.
I'll have to look that up.
Have a watch of it. You will thank me. Honestly, it is hilarious.
That's that weird psychedelic video with Leonard Nimoy singing with a bunch of hobbits.
Exactly, yeah. It's the most bizarre thing I think I've ever seen in my life, and I love it.
It's just a challenge to try and figure out was anyone involved with that not on acid, including Nimoy himself.
Yeah,
and the thought of Leonard Nimoy taking acid's fantastic to me.
It is as well.
I mean, just imagining Nimoy buzzing on acid, that could only be a wonderful thing to behold if anyone ever saw it.
This is not logical. What other Star Trek actors have gone on to do some weird and wonderful things as far as that's concerned? I mean, we know, what's his face? Oh, Sulu. What's Sulu's real name?
George Takei.
That's it, Takei. He's a good laugh. He's a good laugh.
Weirdly, Patrick Stewart, he did narrate, there was kind of fairly serious one called What If We Had No Moon? He was talking about, the moon and how it's related to the Earth, and said a woman's menstrual cycle matches the moon cycle. What does that tell you? I was like, oh, crack. What's happened to you, Picard? Is this what you become? But thankfully after that he became Professor X, so he regained his respectability.
Oh, he's always had my respect. Also with his work on Family Guy and American Dad and God knows what else as well. He's always been this amazingly kind of theatrical guy who's up for a laugh, and I think that's great.
And I think Brian Blessed believes in Sasquatch.
Does he? He is Sasquatch.
Yeah, that's why I say. People always point, because I love Brian Blessed to death. So, he believes in Bigfoot. So, well, he could qualify as a Bigfoot himself when you look at him. Yeah. And it's Brian Blessed. How can you not like the man? So anyway, back to the documentary. I'm not going to start waxing on about how amazing Brian Blessed is. As much as people want to hear that.
There's not a whole lot of other material to cover. There is an important bit at the end where Congressman Stephen Schiff is talking about trying to get information from the military out into the public domain. He got the runaround from Congress, who referred him to the General Accounting Office, which is like the investigative arm of Congress. Yeah. They said they had no material or documents relating to the Roswell incident, because it really was a non-event. But there's that claim in there that when they track the outgoing phone calls from the Army base, that all of those conversations were destroyed.
I think probably the most rational explanation to that is you imagine the whole US military, and at the time the only way to record phone calls was big reel-to-reel tape recorders, and they take up a massive amount of storage space. And so the military's just going to look, well, this is pretty inconsequential. We can get rid of these and just decide what relevant records they want to keep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's one of the favourites of conspiracy. This kind of leads on to what happened at 9/11. And, there was quotes from Rumsfeld and all that just about how inadequate all the military storage records, because that's the famous thing that... it's one of the lesser claims about 9/11 when they interpret Donald Trump saying, there's so many trillions that we can't account for. And what Rumsfeld was actually saying was our systems are so antiquated, there could be trillions of dollars that we've just lost through just having bad record-keeping systems. And he was pushing, saying we need to be better with this.
And Congress or the GAO, I can't remember, well, they're the same thing, but they did make an overture to the public and to Congressman Schiff's request. They did produce a pretty detailed report, and I can't remember the name of the report off the top of my head, but it was pretty detailed. But the public, and in particular the community of people who believe there's a cover-up and all that, they weren't satisfied with it, because at the very end of this documentary they had one guy, I think his name is Walter Haut, or it might have been somebody else. They have footage of him looking through like a sheaf of papers that's all blacked out. And he's like, they gave out the report, but I think the real report is even longer and that they're not giving it to us.
Yeah, so where does he get that from, though? It's like...
Yeah, there's no satisfying these people.
Yeah. So there must be more, because this doesn't support what I believe. I'm going to keep digging until it supports what I believe, even if it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to make up shit that it was fucking gotten rid of. And then when anybody dies, of course, if anybody dies, they've been assassinated. Even if they died of old age, they've been assassinated to hush them.
There are references to that sprinkled throughout this, like where they preface things by saying, if he's still alive, then blah, 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 blah.
What did they reveal about the filmmaker? Did they reveal anything at the end? Because it was so anticlimactic.
Well, they had the private investigator, William Deere, went off to Florida to talk to a guy he got a lead from, who said that he talked to a guy in a bar years and years ago who said something about the Roswell incident. So this 70, 80-year-old guy who says years and years ago there was some guy in a bar talking about Roswell, he thinks that's a good tip. And so he goes to Florida to talk to this guy in a Denny's, and they're making this big deal about it, like listening by remote access from a car outside Denny's with like this special hidden camera to look at him through the window of Denny's, and they're like recording his conversation with microphones and stuff like that. And all this guy is saying in Denny's is, yeah, years ago I remember some guy running off his mouth about Roswell in a bar and he was drunk, and that's it. Like you said early on in this episode, it was very anticlimactic.
Yeah, it was so anticlimactic I couldn't even remember that. And I only watched it a few hours ago. But basically, yeah, it boils down to the ultimate, as Jen would know it. A mate down the pub who I know for sure told me.
Yeah. Which is the most convincing thing ever, if you're drunk and stoned. Because open your mind, man. Open your mind to the possibilities. Oh my god. It was alien.
It actually would have been more credible. They said Leonard Nimoy told me during an acid trip once.
Yeah.
That would make it more interesting, at least.
Because he clearly had, alien DNA in him, so he would have been believable.
Yeah. So what's happened to Santili since? Has he sort of disappeared now, hasn't he?
I don't know.
I'm not sure what he's up to now. Probably nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. In there was a follow-up sort of 10-minute sort of exposing the fraud of it.
Yeah.
And then they're saying, the guy says, I think it's a fraud, and I think it's not going to be discovered that it's a fraud until 10 years later when the guy's made all the money and sold it to as many different places as possible, this footage. And by that point, it won't matter anymore anyway. And it's an amazing hoax regardless. So they're just basically saying, oh, it's probably a hoax. He's probably making loads of money off of it, but nobody's going to care anyway. And they're right. Because not many people even talk about it these days. It's just one of those things that's gone by.
And you notice they answer their own question in that regard. The various people throughout this documentary say things like, why would somebody go to such great lengths to fake something, and why wouldn't they go to Hollywood and get a promising, rewarding career there instead? Well, the answer is people latch onto these kind of things, and it's a good way to become famous. You can become more famous in pseudoscience circles than you can in Hollywood.
And you can have a longer career because people will continue to believe you long, long after you're discredited in pseudoscience.
Yep.
And also, anonymity means that you can make more films in the future without actually anybody knowing where they've come from, and you can make viral videos these days as well. You can make a viral video that'll be shared, many, many thousands, if not millions of times. And that viral video in itself, if you own the rights to it by some sort of subsidiary company or something like that, then you can make packets off of it, selling the rights out for it.
Yeah, due to the saturation effect that Jen talked about earlier, I'm sure Santili couldn't get his foot in the door as easily as he could back in the 90s if he wanted to keep on doing stuff like this.
But if Santili had been smart, if he'd heard that Stan Winston was impressed with what he had done, he would have confessed to Stan Winston and gotten a job with Stan Winston. Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who's grown up watching movies knows Stan Winston's work, and I think working with Stan Winston would be awesome. It would be one of the best jobs you could ever ask for.
He did say, Stan Winston, that if somebody came to the studio and approached him with this footage and said, I did this, they would be hired on the spot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of more of a mystery. Why didn't he just go and do that? Because I would have. I'd been that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just looking up Santili. Basically, there's nothing else apart from it. It just says what he did before. He did and basically, there's nothing really much else about him. Did he actually make money out of this footage?
They mentioned that he may have gotten quite a bit of royalties from various television news stations around the world.
Well, I said you're the journalist here, so say you've got footage like that, do you actually sell it to a news network? Do they pay for that? If it's your own kind of footage as such?
If it's your own footage, yeah, news.
Say just right now I went outside and filmed something weird in the sky and I phoned up the news guys. Would they have to buy it off me? Just seeing as it was my own kind of camera footage.
I think policy differs country to country and even among various institutions here, but for the most part, I think that news organizations do purchase material from the original owners if they want to use it.
It becomes your kind of copyright straight away.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious about it, because I would be genuinely curious to see how much he made out of this Santili.
But it's also, like, I was trained in news writing and not news broadcasting. But in news writing at least, and I think the same applies to news broadcasting, you aren't supposed to reveal your sources. So if you do pay for material, you've got to keep that money track very well hidden. And you're not supposed to leave a trail leading to your source.
Yeah. So, like, Santili will have his books under lock and key then.
You should.
Right, so, any other thoughts on this masterpiece of documentarianism?
Masterpiece? Documentarianism, is that a real word?
No, I just made it up and I'm going to claim that.
That's a good word, I like it.
Yeah. I don't have much else to say.
Yeah. It's, well, by the way, as a correct, it was Robert Schaefer is the well-known UFO skeptic I was talking about earlier.
Right.
Are you familiar with Philip J. Klass, the other very well-known UFO skeptic? He died 10 or 12 years ago, but he had a whole career and several books going into detail about the problems with UFO belief.
Was he not one of the bigwigs behind one of the skeptical magazines as well?
Yeah, he was on the board of the Skeptical Inquirer.
Yeah, it was ringing a bell, that name.
And he has 10 or 12 books, a lot, all about UFOs, alien invasion, alien abduction, just about every aspect of ufology and the problems with it. And he's well-read and talented debunker of all this stuff.
Yeah, so's Robert Schaefer, by the way. Looking at old back catalog, you'll find the interview we did with him, or just look him up online. He does a lot of good work in this area.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of him as well. And one book, a single book I would recommend for anybody interested in this topic is a book of essays and articles from the scientific skeptical point of view called The UFO Invasion. The Roswell Incident, Alien Abductions, and Government Cover-Ups is the subtitle. And that was edited by a team from the Skeptical Inquirer, Kendrick Frazier, Barry Carr, and Joe Nickel. And that's a really excellent resource for looking into this stuff as well. They have a chapter in that book written by a surgeon who examines the contents of the Alien Autopsy video and shows just points out all the problems with it, basically.
Yeah, because I think one of the main ones that surgeons have picked up on is just how they're holding all the implements. They just said no surgeon or pathologist would handle their tools like that. They say one of the giveaways is how they're holding the scissors. They say they're holding like paper cutting scissors, but we actually hold them a completely different way.
Yep.
And was Majestic 12 brought up in this? I can't remember.
I didn't remember it.
Because usually they always link these things to Majestic 12, which I think that's a total hoax. It's not even got any basis, I think. But yeah, that was that.
Yeah, it was pretty underwhelming as far as they go. I think next time we need to step it back up a gear and go for something that's going to be incredibly painful to watch.
Like I said at the start, the real interest in this, it's not mainly from a skeptical point of view, although there are some good things there for skeptics to look at, but it is just as this weird kind of historical artifact, because it seems, as I've said before, it just seems really unremarkable, this, but it's also, you have to gain an understanding of the culture at the time to know why this was such a big deal, and it's kind of now almost forgotten about in history, this.
There will be more. There will be much more.
Yes,
and I can't wait to see the good stuff when it comes out.
Okay, well, are we going to wrap up now then?
Yeah, I think we can wrap up there.
Okay, do we have any teasers for any upcoming shows? Who are we doing next? Or that sounds kind of a weird way to put it.
Since when are we worried about double entendre on this show, Nathan? Were they cancelled? And just given that it was Dick Coughlin, that gave me the chance to say a really filthy line, which Jenn ran off today. So, because I proclaimed to everyone, "Oh, sorry, we're dickless today."
Oh, that would have been cool. Or did you actually write that?
Yes, Jenn, what was your thoughtful response to that?
I can't remember now. I can't remember.
Yeah, but you can imagine how it went from there. So.
Yeah. I think I posted something like that the other day when Dick Coughlin had a bit of a joke in regards to having poked someone instead of blocked them. And I said, "Oh no, you've done it again," because he poked me shortly afterwards. And then I posted on Facebook and I said, "This is what he does when he wants to erase you from his life." Anyone who's been poked by Dick, let's all just be dickless together.
Awesome.
And then I said something to the effect of, "Well, actually, I've been dickless for a few years anyway, so just come and join me."
Next up, John C. Watty, is that? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
John C. Wathy, yeah. So we don't have, that's April 16th, so we don't have a show next Sunday, but the following Sunday. He is the neurobiologist, talking about religious experiences and biology.
Cool.
And I'm just looking ahead, we've got Phil Ferguson after that. He's going to be talking economics, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge of any show we've ever done, is to make economics interesting to people.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Because I don't know whether it's just when people hear the word economics, their eyes just glaze over and they go into a coma straight away.
Well, Vance gets very excited whenever anybody mentions economics, so maybe I'll ask him some tips on what some good questions to ask.
And then it's Baba Brinkman after that.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm going to be out of the country in April between the 23rd and the end of that week. So if we've got any shows on those 2 Sundays, then I'm not going to be involved in those.
Are you going to be in Roswell?
No, I'm actually going to a desert island. I'm going to a desert island for a week to do stretching, meditation, and martial arts.
It'd be quite interesting to hear what you think of that, because I'd just be interested from a skeptic point of view, because there is a fair bit of woo involved in martial arts.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was interested in. And I know that Chris Credelli is the guy who runs it, and he's done a show in the past called Mind, Body and Kick-Ass Moves.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy. I think it's his partner who does kinesiology. So I'll be interested to figure out exactly what type of kinesiology it is, whether it's a genuine sort of medical kinesiology. I understand that. I think that at least there is a genuine medical kind of kinesiology. And then there's the sort of holistic version of that, which uses the same name. So I'll be interested to learn a little bit more about exactly what's involved in that. And I'm going to see if I can do a little blog while I'm on the island as well. It's called Graciosa off the coast of Lanzarote in the Canary Islands.
Nathan, close the show and make it so. It took us that long to get to that line, didn't it?
Well, we finally did. That was our show. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy our show, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. $5 or more donation gets you access to exclusive content, including extended interviews, even though we rarely do those, it seems. And also, we really are looking to get some bonus content out. We've got some plans for that right now. So hopefully we'll have a proper announcement about some regular bonus content for the patrons. Yes, and leave us a review on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening to us on. That helps get us visibility as well.
And thanks to our patrons on Patreon as well.
Our patrons currently are 2, Microbloganism and Josh from the Society for the Advancement of Science, and we'll have links to their channels and pages below. And thank you guys for your support. It's much appreciated. All right. See you next time, guys.
See you next time. Engage.
This is becoming a speech.
You're the captain, sir. You're entitled.
Not entitled to ramble on about something everyone knows.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise.
Make it so. Make it so. Make it so. Make it so.
He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic so that no one You'll have to call again. I'm just leaving. I'm not dressed properly. My love is a fever, longing till for that which longer nurseth the disease. You'll have to call again. In faith, I do not love thee. With mine eyes they be 1,000 ever see. But 'tis my heart that loves what they despise. In despite of you, are pleased to know. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? To my questions. I am locutus aboard. You aboard. I am locutus aboard. You will assist us. I am locutus aboard. You aboard. I am locutus aboard. Block phases on that vessel. I am locutus aboard. There are 4 lights.
Later it's come out, the truth about this film, but like I say, at the time, it was the X-Files was just kicking off, and so there's a huge spike in this interest, and also just the claims that this guy made, and now that they've been reviewed, I say it's just a very nice kind of captures a moment in time in the 90s when the interest was so peaking in this, and this actually caused some genuine debate amongst people as to the veracity of the claims.
Yeah, of course, today it's just an obscure conspiracy video among thousands you can find on YouTube, but that historical value that you talked about is what makes it noteworthy. And it's kind of a good exercise in how to think skeptically about things, because as we said already, this was before the reveal that Ray Santili had faked the footage. And so...
Well, that's, he's not actually confessed to faking it. As always, he's made it a bit muddier than that.
Yeah, what he said was that the original footage was degraded, and he basically filled in the gaps of because he said he saw the undegraded version in 1992, and he said that what he did was, I created this special effect just to fill in the degraded portions of what I actually saw.
And he's also said there's a few frames of the original that are still intact that he put in there, but he absolutely refuses to say which frames they are.
That's a very typical line to take when you've been kind of rumbled, but you still want to keep it alive because it made him a lot of money.
Because the thing is, if there are original frames, you think he'd want to admit to it. Said, there you go, you can see these original frames.
Yeah.
Compare them to the work I did and see how amazing it all matches up. Or like say, you can see how it's different and, that shows you that's an original, but yeah. And that part kind of plays into the kind of premise of this documentary very well. Like knowing this now and then watching it again, you can see, like I said, I discussed this before we were doing it. I know we're not talking about it, but it's kind of interesting. And I always think this documentary, they actually tried to make it about their hunt for the cameraman. And I think it came back with such little footage that all this other stuff has kind of been patched on because it does get a bit random with its experts at times.
Yeah, the private investigator subplot, if you will, about William C. Deere trying to hunt down the participant in the 1947 filming. That portion of this documentary seemed like kind of tacked on, like they were originally going to flesh that out more, but they couldn't get enough material for it.
Because there's no real payoff to that in the end. Very anticlimactic, the ending to that.
Looking it up afterwards, there seems to be a claim that the person who actually recorded the footage was the same person who recorded various other things like the atomic bomb tests. But once again, there's sort of no confirmation of that and everything's a bit sketchy. And they brought him in as an expert at one point, didn't they? And said it's definitely the right kind of camera equipment because it was a fixed focus distance. And if you went in close, it wouldn't have focused. And that's the kind of kit that was available. And then that's about all that he said, I think, pretty much through the entire...
he was also... just because they bring in an actual professional cameraman at one point. And he was saying, it's going out of focus. And also there's a bit where they're actually doing I think it's when they're sawing the skull or something. And they say, like, he just stands behind the doctor's back. Why wouldn't he go round to get a better angle? And military guys just say, he didn't want to interfere with what was going on.
Yeah, of course, because that's what you do, isn't it? Yeah, no. There was only two guys in there. There was plenty of angles he could have taken. He didn't have to be behind the doctor. Yeah.
You have an alien from another world on your operating table, and you're worried about getting in the way of the surgeons.
Yeah.
I mean, the most stupid thing about it is if he'd have just stayed at one end of the table, or even just set it up on a tripod at one end of the table, it would never have been in the way of anything that they were doing at all, and you'd have got the whole thing from start to finish.
Well, that's the other thing. You'd think they would have had multiple cameramen in the room to document every single angle and a few fixed cameras on the roof, so...
Well, yeah.
You think they would be extremely thorough with this huge, kind of very vital discovery they just made.
Exactly, and also the room was set up to look as if it was a purpose-built facility for this kind of thing. There was a microphone hanging from the ceiling, the phone on the wall. There was an observation port behind where there was somebody looking through, and yet the camera was freehand. Didn't make sense. Didn't really make sense.
Yeah, they that was one detail they weren't too careful about. They were careful about other things like putting a 1937 era Bell telephone in and like a sunken tray of the kind used in the 1940s. But some things he let slip.
And also the guy who was responsible for this was a guy who worked in films, as in he worked with films. He had view of extensive collections of different films from that particular era, so he would have been able to see what kind of stuff was around. So he was the perfect kind of person to be able to do this anyway.
Yeah, this was John Humphreys, I believe, who was responsible for the effects and the filming of this.
Yeah, he's come out and confessed, hasn't he, that it was a hoax?
Yeah, he was an artist and sculptor. He was employed, I believe, by Santili and his partner, Gary Schofield, to construct 2 dummy alien bodies over a period of 3 weeks. The casts he used contained sheep brains that he placed in raspberry jam. They also used chicken entrails and knuckle joints that they got from a butcher shop in London. So all this stuff is out in public knowledge now.
As for the documentary itself, as we stated, this is kind of a heavy use of celebrity because, again, you got to remember at the time Star Trek was very big on TV, so this helped sell it a lot. And this is another kind of observation I made. I honestly think they just did the same take of all these intros with Jonathan Frakes because he just seems to repeat himself, just slightly different wording or a different angle, and I got that vibe very strong. That maybe he just filmed this a few times and that was it for him. paycheck, please. I'm on my way home.
And one of the things that they kept saying throughout, well, I think they said it maybe 3 or 4 times in the documentary is, if it's real, it's amazing, and if it's fake, it's still amazing. And it's just like, okay, so you're basically saying that regardless of whether it's real or fake, it should be seen as something important. And I thought that was a load of bollocks, to be honest, because it's like, if it's fake, then you've been duped, and it just shows how easy to dupe people are. So it's useful, but apart from that, it's really not, especially in this day and age. If we look back at it now with the kind of technology that we have now, it looks almost amateurish. It looks like something you could easily do. I mean, the special effects for that kind of stuff were around in the 70s anyway. You've got The Thing, for example. Yeah. So, yeah.
Stan Winston was fooled by it, even, and he did the effects for Jurassic Park and Aliens. And
that was an embarrassing scene.
It was, and this just goes to show that, well, Stan Winston isn't a scientist, but the principle is kind of the same, where scientists are easily fooled by...
Yeah, well, he wasn't even saying he wasn't human. He was just saying that there were a load of different mutations on this particular body if it was human. But that in itself is a weird thing to say. It's like saying, well, it could be a cow, but it's got hands, and it's got ears, it's got a donkey's tail.
Flying saucers everywhere. Say, did you see one too? One night they came to me and they were all so come to you. Those flying saucers are my friends, 'cause
Hello and welcome to Trolling with Logic, where we bring the hammer down on pseudoscience, ignorance, and unreason on a bi-weekly basis. And I think that's going to end up being a staple intro. I'm getting pretty good at that.
All right.
I'm your host, Nathan, and with me, as usually always, I think, are my co-hosts, Cal and Jen. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I haven't been on for weeks now, so I feel really out of the loop on this. So.
That's right. You've not been here for ages, have you? Welcome back. You can be our special guest for today, Cal.
You only missed 2 shows. So it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the 3rd season of The X-Files, there's an episode called Nisei, which includes a scene in which FBI agent Fox Mulder is watching a video of an alien autopsy. Watching with him is his partner, the skeptical Dana Scully, who comments, "Mulder, this is even hokier than the one they aired on the Fox network. You can't even see what they're operating on." That Fox network feature documentary is what we are reviewing here on the show today. This is a UFO conspiracy documentary called Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, and was hosted by Commander William T. Riker himself, Jonathan Frakes, who played the Riker character in Star Trek The Next Generation. When this thing was aired on the Fox network in August 1995, it caused a huge sensation. It was a pretty big deal, and it made an impact on the public perception of the so-called Roswell incident.
Yeah, it's just I want to bring this. The reason I've wanted to do this on the show, because it's not just that it's a kooky kind of conspiracy thing, but the documentary itself now stands as a very kind of interesting historical artifact, given,
by charlatans like psychics and parapsychologists and that kind of thing, where they're not expecting to be deceived. And so they look at stuff like this, and they're not thinking about the deception factor. They're just looking at it as, how could I have done this? And if they can't think of how they could have done this, then they're prone to jump to a wrong conclusion. And if Stan Winston had consulted not a magician like James Randi, but somebody who was skilled in the art of, well, fraud detection, could have helped him out.
Or an illusionist even, but it's strange you mentioned Stan Winston, because actually a few years later Stan Winston came and he said that they actually left huge portions of his interview out, and he said they left out where he clearly says, it's a hoax. I don't know how they did it, but it is quite obviously a hoax. I don't know how to, I would do it. And he says that's how he was saying it. He said, I personally don't know how I would approach that, because I've never been asked to do such a thing in the movies.
So it wasn't necessarily embarrassing for him. It was just that they left out huge portions.
Yeah, and they also altered, like I said, the main thrust, he's kind of clarified that I was just saying I wouldn't know how to do that because I've never been asked.
Yeah.
And he said, it's quite impressive, but...
What about the wetness, though, Callum? What about the wetness?
The uniform wetness and the way it drips.
That was amazing. I mean, when they were doing the cut into it with the blood dripping out, I was thinking, well, the image is so grainy anyway. It's very difficult to see what's going on. And that kind of technology where they would have a pen that squirts out a little bit of liquid to pretend like it's a scalpel, which it could have even been. That technology's been around since the early times of cinema. That sort of stuff.
But again, this is where the historical artifact is very vital to remember, that this was before the internet where we could stream videos, download them and analyse frame by frame. So, it was just shown on TV. You might record it on your VHS and, it'll be even grainier to watch. So that's why I think it just impressed so many people.
I want to note something that I've noted before in relation to the fact that Jonathan Frakes is in this documentary. And that is that I've noticed a weird trend in which the stars of these great sci-fi television shows tend to go on to host